Hey Lane, how's it going?
Going well, Kyle. Glad to be back with you.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you back, especially because I've been reading some articles trying to again learn about the industry and what's happening in freight and all that. And there's a couple of headlines that keep popping up that I've been seeing, and I'm going to hit you with a couple of them and then kind of ask you questions about these headlines. So the first one is a Georgia trucking company shuts down after 38 years. Company officials cite insurance costs being one of the reasons. A Texas based flatbed carrier with 260 trucks shuts down, citing insurance costs. And finally, a Tennessee based trucking company ceases operations after 69 years. The owner cites, say it with me, soaring insurance costs.
Insurance costs,
What,
yeah.
what's happening, Lane? Why are all these trucking companies shutting down? And why is insurance costs being one of the main reasons why? Are we seeing just it coming up bigger? What's happening in the insurance market?
So, trucking insurance companies are having trouble making a profit by insuring fleets, basically. I mean, that's the simplest way to look at it. No matter how much premium the insurance company charges, they seem to be losing money uh, on claims costs. And I think if you look at the data that AM Best provides, I think it was 2018 or 2019. It was 2018. 2019 numbers aren't out yet. But during 2018, for every dollar in insurance premium that the insurance company collected from a trucking company, they paid out $1.13 in claims costs. So they were losing 13 cents for every dollar in premium that they brought in. That's going to be one of the main reasons that you see trucking insurance rates climbing is they're just having trouble making a profit. And that's what they're in business to do for their stakeholders, their employees, and just for their business. They're not a nonprofit. You know what I'm saying?
Right. They gotta make money, but why are these costs climbing? I mean, uh one of the things, and not to kind of skip ahead, but we see a lot of stuff of nuclear verdicts being handed down, and it's sort of what we talked about in our last conversation, is that a lot of times that a trucking company or a carrier sets themselves up for a certain amount of money to kind of fall out, but these nuclear verdicts are bigger and bigger. I mean, a whole another headline I have up is a $7.4 million verdict. A jury slapped a Texas trucking company. I mean, is that why costs are increasing, or what's happening with this?
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I have to delineate two different types of insurance for the liability, the auto liability. And if it gets too complicated, just tell me, and I'll break it down in a more simple way.
All right, I'll jump in if I don't know what's
Okay,
happening.
perfect. So in auto liability and in other types of insurance, there are what we call primary insurance. That is the insurance that is the first to pay out claims. So if there was a severe accident, that primary insurance is going to pay the first $1 million, or whatever they decide they want to take on. They could pay the million, 3 million, 5 million, whatever they agree with the motor carrier. After the primary insurance is all used, after that first $1 million is paid out, the excess insurance kicks in. And excess insurance is anything that's above the primary insurance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of like a reserve, and more or less. Like, you have the primary insurance, but you also save some money just in case.
Uh, kind of. So excess is to protect yourself in the event of a worst case scenario. So if you're a large motor carrier, you're probably going to be buying excess insurance to protect your profits, your bottom line. You might be buying $5 million in insurance, $10 million, or $100 million in insurance. The primary is going to be that first $1 or $5 million. The excess is the next $95 million in insurance. So these nuclear claims, no matter what, the primary is getting used. The excess market is what's being hit the hardest by the nuclear verdicts. So that's impacting the industry differently than the primary insurance market. The primary insurance market is what some of the smaller carriers are citing as the reason that they're having to shut down their businesses. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, that the cost for the smaller fleets, which make up a good amount of the truckload space, especially kind of that smaller 5 to 6 to 10 trucks, like actual trailers and tractors or all that stuff. That's the one that primary insurance is affecting. That's why we're seeing that. But the headlines are more about those bigger fleets, which is where the excess is coming into play.
Right. The headlines that we're seeing on the nuclear verdicts, those headlines are really impacting the excess market more than they are affecting the primary market. So I want to get into the primary market and why those rates are going up, because that's the real issue for some of the smaller fleets, right? That the primary insurance is just becoming too expensive. It's making it impossible to operate at a profit for the trucking company.
Yeah, that's definitely going that, because capacity is going to be huge. I mean, you hear those things of the big companies, but those are small compared to just how many smaller fleets are having this issue. So yeah, let's definitely talk about that. What's happening? Is the insurance going up because of the technology being brought into these machines, into these trucks and stuff, or where's this all kind of occurring?
That's a great question and a great point on the technology. On average, we're seeing primary rate increases somewhere between 10 and 30%. So if a company was paying $1 million for insurance last year, they might be paying $1.3 million this year, which is a huge jump. The reason that the costs are going up the way they are is because claims are more expensive today and they're happening more often. It's called frequency. The frequency of accidents is higher than it was a couple years ago. And we see the cost of those claims rising because the cost of the property that is being damaged is more expensive. Our personal vehicles have more technology in them. You know, a fender bender that would have cost $500 to fix 10 years ago cost $5,000 to fix today. The cost of medical treatment has gone up tremendously. So for every claim that happens, it's more expensive to resolve or indemnify the parties, and they're happening more often. So they're getting hit from all sides. The insurance companies are getting hit from all sides with costs, and they're getting hit more frequently. And to make up for that, they have to charge more premium so that they can cover their costs. And they've been trying to catch up for the last 6 years, 7 years. They've been paying out more in claims than they've been taking in premium.
How is that happening? Like, how, with the data and stuff, how are insurance companies not able to kind of predict sort of this increase? How are they running into this issue?
They're using the data. So there's a program called from the Central Analysis Bureau. It sounds like a government entity. It's not. They aggregate DOT data. So the insurance companies have access to an immense amount of data and analytics where they can look at where the trucking company is having the most DOT violations. They can see the speeding violations, seatbelt violations, failure to maintain lane. They can see every single violation that the motor carrier has accrued. And those violations add up. And the motor companies are being charged increased premium for those violations. But the the premium that they're increasing it to still isn't enough to make up for the claims that are being paid out. And there's no easy answer. I think one of the issues is, to be candid with you, is the plaintiffs' attorneys have billboards all along the highways, and everybody that sees a truck or gets close to a truck could call one of these attorneys and they'll bring a lawsuit. And the litigation landscape in certain jurisdictions is very favorable to the plaintiffs. It's basically like the concept of liability has basically gone out the window at this point. Juries are awarding massive verdicts that are not equal to the loss that was incurred. We saw it with the Johnson & Johnson lawsuit recently. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but a gentleman was awarded $6.5 billion with a B, because he took a certain medication and that medication altered his body in a way that he didn't like. And so the jury decided that was worth $6.5 billion. And the judge in the case recently, this was in the last month, came back and said, there's no way we're awarding $6.5 billion for this. It's just way out of line with the loss. So I say that just to point out that jury awards sometimes aren't in line with reality. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with these nuclear verdicts. Yeah, that's about all I've got on that.
Sorry, my mouth is just wide open, like it's a jar. Like, so how is this happening? Are you starting to see any semblance of reality coming back into play, or like you're saying, it's just liabilities out the window, or kind of what? Wow, it's just wow. Like, so just thinking about that, and how do you get insurance? And it seems like it's still chaos is occurring. Like, no one's kind of coming back to reality of like, hey, these are expensive machines for everyone. But sorry, and I know you're starting to say something, but I see all the time, I mean, dash cam videos and all that type of stuff. Isn't the more kind of connected world we're becoming, wouldn't that help in the sense that like technology and the filming and everything like that? Like, there's like a YouTuber that I was watching, like she just films herself driving every single day and does a daily vlog, and they all have these little cameras just pointing out where they're driving. I mean, wouldn't that be helping the market?
Well, that sounds dangerous to me.
Well, they're not filming; they're just setting it up and not really, like, they're not touching it or anything. Like the dash cam videos, stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Those are helpful, and the more and more companies that adopt the technology, the dash cam technology, the better off they'll be. That kind of brings me to my next point, if I can, about what motor carriers can do to put themselves in a better position to negotiate with the insurance companies. The technology that we have, the dash cams, the lane departure, the forward facing sensors that detect when the trucks are getting too close to the vehicle in front of them. All of these things can help us operate more safely and efficiently. But the difference in having the technology and articulating how that technology is being used to the insurance company is where folks can really make a difference in their negotiations. If you have all sorts of technology in your vehicles, but you can't help the insurance company understand what you're doing with it, it might help with efficiency and it might help with safety, but the insurance company is not going to understand all that. We have to be able to essentially sell them on safety culture and what the trucking companies are embracing and how they are trying to avoid the frequency of accidents that we're seeing and trying to avoid that next nuclear verdict.
Yeah. Because that would like, I guess the thing that I think about right away is that like the being more of a younger kind of techie guy is that whole everything you're talking about. But I'm surprised that the communication needs to occur. Like, as someone who's in that insurance field, what do you look for? What would you be hoping that the motor carrier would be kind of telling you about this type of stuff? And like, when does this communication occur? Because we know technology just happens lightning speed. It's always that I forgot what the name of the effect is, but just constantly multiplying in terms of what the processing power is and everything like that. How often are motor carriers, or should motor carriers be communicating what they're bringing into this space?
I mean, that should be there should be a constant flow of information, really, between the motor carrier, their insurance company, and their broker, and I would say their shippers too, because the shippers want to operate with safe motor carriers, right? I mean, that's y'all's world is the shipper in these contracts. So
Yeah, service
shippers,
level, all that. Yeah, it all goes into
right,
what the shipper is really looking for.
right, and they don't want an unsafe truck running their freight, because when that nuclear verdict happens, the attorney is going to put everybody and their brother on the I'm not sure what they'd call it, but basically as the defendants, the shipper, the motor carrier, the freight broker, anybody they can think of to drag them into that lawsuit. The other thing with the cameras, they're not just really video recording technology. They're also driver coaching tools. Did you know that?
No, what do you
Yes.
mean?
So when an event occurs and a vehicle has one of these dash cams, whether it's Lytx or Smart Drive or Bendix or any of these other technologies, a video report gets sent to the safety director or whoever is designated to review these incidents. So when they see a video, and it records like 12 to 30 seconds. So we'll say a driver is going down the road and he slams on his brakes. That event where he slammed on the brakes or she slammed on the brakes triggers the camera. And so it automatically goes back 15 seconds and records that. And then it records forward another 15 seconds. So you could see what was going on when the driver slammed on his brakes. And that video then goes through processing and eventually ends up at the motor carrier. The motor carrier's job then is to bring the driver in, talk to them about that event, if it was coachable. So if they were following too close or something like that and had to slam on their brakes, the safety director or his assistant safety director or whoever will talk to the driver about what occurred and help them hopefully become better at their craft. Just like a football player practices and the coaches watch their footwork and they run agility drills or they do different things. These cameras are supposed to be tools like that for the motor carrier and their drivers.
Yeah, but I mean, we've all seen the Mike Vick 30 for 30. You don't have to watch the tape, baby. You just got to be a speedster out there.
That's the
just
new
joking.
Lamar Jackson.
Just joking.
Lamar Jackson's taking the Mike Vick mantle.
Yeah, that I didn't realize that. So my question, and it's probably something that off the top of your head, you're gonna be like, Kyle, why the hell are you asking me this? But like, we talk about the primary, we talk about the smaller carriers being the ones who kind of are having this bigger issue in terms of just cost of insurance and all. How often are you seeing those smaller trucks have dash cams or have this type of technology implemented in their operation?
It's more and more common today than it has been, and I think people are going to be embracing it much more over these coming years. As far as smaller carriers, it really depends. I couldn't give you like a ratio, but I've had clients with 17 trucks that had dash cams. And I've seen companies with 200 trucks that didn't have dash cams. It's really kind of hit or miss. The ones that have the dash cams are kind of embracing what the future holds, what can be when it comes to safety technology, which is it's easier to work with those guys and the insurance companies than somebody that's just running as much freight as possible and just kind of puts safety to the side. Not that they're doing it on, but there are motor carriers like that they're just trying to make a dollar. There's fewer and fewer of them today because the insurance costs and all that stuff is kind of shaking out, and people can see what's what with all the data we have.
So this could be conjecture, but do you think, especially because it's just top of the mind, is the whole electronic logging devices and the ELD devices? Do you think, and I know, like, I watch those YouTubers where they tell the truckers complain the hell out of these things and they hate the hell out of it. But do you see a benefit in terms of having sort of technology that's right now mandated to be using, but it's giving these truckers this kind of exposure to the new world of more data is being collected, more information's being gathered. And it's not just because, hey, we want to make sure you're sleeping. It's because stuff like insurance costs are rising. So being able to kind of see what you're traveling, how many hours you had and stuff will help out in the long run.
Yeah. So I have an opinion on hours of service, but I'll keep that to myself for now.
Well, that'll be another episode.
The electronic logs, I think, can be a very valuable asset for a motor carrier, not just on, the drivers maintaining proper drive times and rest breaks and other things that the government mandates for them to do, but in understanding where they are having inefficiencies in their operations. They can know which shippers are holding them longer, and they'll actually have the data, hard data to go to the shippers and say, hey, our average detention time at your facilities is X. We need it to be down to B, or we need to start collecting, penalties essentially for these detention times. So I think it'll help them operationally. As far as risk management, I'm not sure how much the e-logs will impact safety operations specifically. There is actually a category of DOT inspections that is for hours of service. So we should start seeing the hours of service infractions decline, which can help with insurance costs.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting. The other thing I kind of been paying attention to is the whole drug mandate and stuff like that. I forget what it is, but the whole drug
and alcohol clearinghouse.
Yeah. How do you think? Basic prediction, right? It's just you're predicting the stuff because no one really knows how it's going to shape out. But do you think that helps a little bit too, in the sense of less and less the verdicts? Because I think a lot of times a lot of juries probably have this picture in their head of what a truck driver is. And they probably think of the horror stories of like the one that happened in New Hampshire where the guy had literally plowed through a bunch of bikers because he was like high as like heck. But
a kite.
Is that, high as a kite. I'm trying to think of a way to say it clean. But how do you see that kind of playing out? I mean, what's your kind of feel on that type of thing?
Well, the insurance market, the insurance market's already kind of really restricted trucking companies from hiring guys that have drug and alcohol violations on their record. I was working on a renewal for someone a while back, and during the renewal process, one of their drivers got hit with an infraction for possession of a narcotic. And basically, the majority of the insurance companies that we were working with declined to offer terms. They would not offer a quote, terms, anything to the motor carrier because of that violation. It didn't matter what procedures the motor carrier followed while hiring that driver. Nothing mattered. All that mattered was that they had a drug and alcohol violation, and that was enough for the insurance companies to bow out. So that, from an economic perspective, already kind of kept motor carriers in line with all of that. I think that adding the drug and alcohol clearinghouse will be a good way to weed out drivers that might be flying under the radar, might have failed a drug test somewhere, and never got on the road for that company and just kind of waited a little bit and went and applied somewhere else. Overall, I think it'll be helpful, but the data that goes into it has to be accurate. Garbage in, garbage out. So if the data isn't being collected properly, or people aren't sharing the data how they should, the whole thing is going to be an exercise that brings almost no value.
Yeah. And I think if to wrap up, or kind of as we start to wrap up, if we're thinking about something, I mean, it's that whole idea of data and motor carriers information and having a good grasp of it. If I'm understanding kind of what we're saying, the insurance rates are rising, the costs are going to be there, and it's a lot of the premium stuff. But you can have the technology, but in order to communicate that, you're going to have a good handle of the information that you actually have. Mm-hmm. So is that sort of what you're seeing? Is you guys kind of communicate with these motor carriers? Is that when you can tell they have a good handle on their data, how important is that? Especially for just insurance alone.
It's extremely important. Our favorite thing to do during a renewal is, and other people do this too, is to partner with the motor carrier to help them understand what they have and help them articulate that to the insurance company. The best way to articulate it is sitting down in front of the underwriter, face to face, old school, and having a real conversation so that the motor carrier can tell their story. They need to sell themselves to this insurance company or multiple insurance companies. Having an understanding of where your company stands relative to its peers is a good starting point when it comes to technology, when it comes to claims history, when it comes to claims frequency, all of these. Understanding how you stack up against those that are in your same peer group is a great starting point, because then you can start to figure out where you need to invest and how to get out in front of some of the issues that might be coming.
It's fascinating to me, especially just, again, my audience, the people listening to this conversation are mainly shippers. And I think the whole point you just said of most of the time you got to have one of your underwriters sit down with the trucking company and really outline their data, help them understand what they're gathering. I think a lot of times that's what the shippers kind of, you assume that people have this information. You assume people understand kind of everything they're doing because you're working off pricing models and price ratings and stuff like that. But when you break it down, it's a lot of people kind of learning as they go, especially the ones that have been in this world a little bit longer and kind of are just kind of adjusting to the new deluge of technology kind of being introduced daily to trucking, into freight, into transportation. It's fascinating to hear that, especially just like I said, it's my audience, the people listening to the show, they interact with the same people you interact with. And just to hear that, you've got to sit down with them to talk through their data is interesting.
Yeah. And I would not sit down with the insurance company and then have them help me figure out my data. I would already know my stuff from, the back of my hand before the insurance company ever came and sat down with me. And this is applicable for the shippers, manufacturers, for everyone. It's not just trucking that could benefit from being able to articulate their value to the insurance companies. I have a couple of other ideas or suggestions for motor carriers that could be applicable to shippers too, if you have a minute.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Okay. So when I gave my presentation to the Georgia Motor Trucking Association a while back, I shared some of these same data points, and they were well received. So I thought your audience would enjoy it too. When should a company start analyzing their insurance renewal process was the first thing we discussed. And I would suggest that everyone should begin at least 6 months before their policies expire. People should be thinking about what kind of deductibles they want to take. They should be thinking about how much of their risk they want to ship off to the insurance company and how much of it they want to retain for themselves. But they shouldn't do that alone. They should use a broker, an insurance broker, that will help them understand their claims history and where the most efficient deductible lies. Another thing I would recommend is gathering your loss run information, your loss history, at least once a quarter, so that you can understand exactly where all of your claims history lies, understand how much is being paid out, how much is in reserves. And if things seem out of line, go back to the insurance company and try to get them to bring some of these claims down. And, the last thing that Kyle and I have already talked about a good bit is understanding your value proposition and articulating it to the insurance companies. So that's really all I've got, Kyle. I'd encourage people to start thinking about renewals way earlier than they're used to, understand where their claims are, and understand how to articulate their value to the insurance companies. That's about it.
I love it. There's always going to be more things that we can always talk about insurance. I think it's just fascinating. As more and more headlines come up, people are going to always be wondering like what's happening. So I think the best thing for the audience is to get in contact with you, Lane. You're about talking. So LinkedIn's the best place, right? If anyone wants to reach out to you, or tell people how they can get in contact with you. Yeah, no,
LinkedIn is great. Have a lot of communication through there. I prefer to have, I'm a millennial, but I still like to have conversations on the phone or face to face. I was in Jacksonville last week visiting with potential clients. I'll be out in Texas next week, and hopefully Oregon in March. So I'm old school. I like shaking a hand and looking somebody in the eye and just having a real conversation. But LinkedIn's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you're coming up here to Boston at some point, so I can beat you in Mortal Kombat. So we're gonna have a blast then. The only last thing yeah, I wouldn't. It's cold and just miserable up here right now. I'd wait until we get summertime. Yeah. In the meantime, that's all I really got for you, Elaine. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Kyle, and always happy to be a guest and have conversation with you, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Have a good day.